Everybody for allowing me to come here and speak with you. And by the way, everybody's made me feel very comfortable. Liz already punched me twice. I don't know if that's part of the deal.
Yeah.
The group.
Yes. Well,
You're part of the group now.
She said hi.
They're good. Must like you.
Yes, that's what I learned. That's what I learned. So, pleasure to be here. My full name is Darwin Roman. Just kind of give you the background on myself. I'm originally from Roselle Park. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Elizabeth, the area around it. That's where I grew up. High school there. Also joined the Marine Corps right out of high school. So I'm a former Marine. So in case you're wondering where the loudness of the voice comes, that's where it's coming from. Okay. And I've been actually in the financial service industry now, going on my 6th year. Currently licensed in life and health in New York, New Jersey, and North Carolina. Today my topic is to discuss a little bit about pension options and what things are to consider when it comes time for pension. And it's actually executing some of those options, especially when it comes to survivor. Does anybody currently have or know somebody that has a pension? I know it's a dying breed out there, right? So law enforcement, teachers, firefighters, police officers, all have pensions. But the question is what happens when that time comes? And there's going to be some options to go through. And before I even get to that point, I want to also make this interactive with us. It's going to be kind of a boring lecture. I know everybody just had their meal, so you're probably half asleep already. So I'm going to wake you up, okay? If you fall asleep, feel free to stand up. Take about one, because we're kind of have a small group here today. If we could, I'm going to table 1 and table 2, I'm going to call you, all right? Take about 30 seconds, real quickly, go around just around the clock, and take out maybe 1 or 2 things that you feel are important if you currently have a pension, or maybe you know somebody. What will be important to you about having a pension? What's the good thing about having one? All right, so I'll give you about 30 seconds real quick. Talk amongst yourselves. Once we're done with that, I'll pick 1 or 2 brave souls to kind of represent the table. Give me some of the things that jumped out, and we'll talk about those. All right, so ready, set, go. 30 seconds.
All right, so what's important?
It dies with you.
Well,
$684.
generated. What's important to you? Having one, yeah. Or the fact that we don't have one. Do you have one? No. Oh, you have one.
You have to make this.
What's your taxes?
I chose not.
Yeah, you want to keep more.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, time is up. 30 seconds goes by fast. We're having fun. I can tell there's a lot of conversations going. So we'll start with her real quick because I can see a lot of conversations going.
Danielle,
I can tell everybody pointed.
she had a good one.
And I tell you what, don't do a crime with these people because they're like.
We have a bail bond person.
Okay. Oh, okay, very good. Good person to that. Danielle Richards, correct? Nice to meet you. Okay.
Yes, I'm self-employed, but was working for an employer for over almost 25 years. So I had a pension, very lucky to have a pension.
Yes.
Because it wasn't any of the categories that I was in the media industry. And I left in 2008, and I guess shortly before that time, when they send you the annual things about your pension, we were getting letters saying that the pension was unrefunded, and they're required to report that, I guess, because of IRS regulations or whatever. What are the implications of that, I guess, is what the questions are. Like, how do you know that it's safe? I mean, it was with New York Life, so, I guess that's a pretty, well-known, but you hear all these other stories about, usually if there's some sort of criminal activity that the pensions, disappear or whatever. But, in this case, it's more a thing of like, is there enough money to support all of the people that are in this, part of the pension?
So your concern is whether or not, because the pension hasn't been funded properly, what are the implications to you?
It's underfunded. And I think it's just because there's, so many people participating. Now, again, it was at one point during, after the point that I became vested, it was after the whole Enron thing, they actually froze the pension. So no new employees could participate. And the people that were, and the people that were vested were still vested. But, I lost my train of thought, sorry.
You were saying investing.
Yeah, and they said at the time, they said the reason was because of the whole Enron thing. I guess there were some new regulations that were passed that required, pensions to have insurance, like, funds.
Sure.
And the insurance premiums were the millions of dollars to insure, a big pension like that. So at that point, there were no more contributions to it. It was just, sitting there, hopefully earning something.
Right,
So,
right.
I made the decision, I ended up starting to draw my pension last year.
Okay.
And I don't spend it, it just, at least now I'm controlling how it's invested, because, you constantly hear these stories about people that work their whole careers, and then all of a sudden, the money's not there.
Right. And that's a big implication, is that once a pension isn't properly funded, whether it be a private pension program through a privately held company or a public company, or, as we all very aware of the situation down in New Jersey and many states, and even on the public sector side and working for the government, the same risks are there with regards to the validity and the actual foundation of the pension system, which is in trouble. So the implications will be that the actual number you expected to get in the time of retirement may not be the number you're actually going to receive due to the fact of lack of funding. So that's kind of the question there. Yeah. But thank you for bringing that up. So I'm going to bring up some of the things that you may have come across in the rest of your pension study. Table 2. Anything to come up? Important things about pensions, what you like about them, what if you had one, if you did have one.
Some of the concerns was the taxes.
Taxes.
The tax implications, and to make it as self-generating and for as long as possible.
Okay. So making sure you don't outlive it as long as possible. Right, some of the things. Now, can a pension help with guaranteeing income? I heard guarantees too. Did anybody say that before? It's nice to have a pension because it's a guaranteed paycheck? Right. So that's one of the pluses of it. That's the idea behind it, is that a guaranteed paycheck should be guaranteed for life. And we're going to talk about those things. So I appreciate everybody giving me their feedback. And, whenever I speak to any group or any individual, the same concerns, the same things come up with regards to how my pension pay out, what are the options going to be, what's the structure, how's even the whole thing work? And most of the time, these questions come up at the day or maybe about 6 months prior to your separation from your job, which is not probably the best time to figure out what options you should be taking.
No.
This is probably a better conversation to have maybe years prior to that point. But getting to the point, so going into, I appreciate again your feedback. So pensions. So we're talking about pension here, and we're going to take it at a high level. How actually the mechanics of a pension work. So when it comes to pensions, most unions or most states have a calculation. And most of the people that I've spoken to when they're on the job, they typically have the whole dream of doing the big old 25 years and out. Anybody ever heard of that before? You can do my 25 years and I'm out of here. Now I'm going to Florida, I'm going wherever. And this typically happens. Now, when I speak to more and more law enforcement or teachers today, this number is actually changing. The 25 years is no longer 25 years, it could be 30. Some, and the younger you are, could be 35. But let's just say that 25, as of right now, is where we're sitting. In order to get to the 25 years and out, they're going to give you a calculation of your income based on something called, I'm going to give you an acronym here, FAS, Final Average Salary. So typically what would happen is they're going to combine the last 3 years of your income and give you an average salary based on those 3 years. When they get that number, they're going to make calculations. So for mathematic purposes, we'll say that the final average salary in this scenario is $100,000. Now, $100,000, and most union contracts and most police officers and firefighters, teachers, typically have a 60% calculation factor. So, in our scenario here, 60% of $100,000 means you will retire on $60,000. Everybody follow so far? Pretty easy, right? Easy to now. This is going to be one of the options coming up. Yes.
I was just gonna ask, is the 60% determined by how many years in?
How many years in? Now, and I'm glad you brought that up. And also, if something comes up later, you can. I'm going to open this up for Q&A as well. But great question. That will come up, and I'm going to go into that too. So we're at $60,000. This is what's known as your max option, also known as your single option. Max option. Now, most of us, or some of us, will also have a family to consider when it comes to our options, spouse and kids. Now, understand that these options are also going to affect your spouse and kids, because the beautiful part about a pension is that if should you pass away, there's something called a survivor benefit. Is that familiar to most people? All right. Now, when it comes to survivor benefits, there's going to be some more options to consider. Here are the other options. And I'm breaking them down in short letters here. JH standing for joint half. Meaning, you'll have a joint income. However, should you pass away, and in my scenario, as I say, even if you happen to retire on a Monday, you pass away on a Friday, your spouse will receive, in this scenario, half of your income, half of your retirement. So in this version, we're talking $27,000 payable to surviving spouse for the rest of their life. There's another option that's also called JF, joint full, where in this situation, you will be able to have your spouse, if you were to pass away on a Friday again, the full pension transfer over, in this case, $52,000. So for all of us to kind of review here, we notice here, a max option based on $100,000 is $60,000. The joint half is $54,000, and the joint full is $52,000. Now, typically, if we are in love with our spouse, or at least maybe like our spouse at that point, we will pick joint full option. Make sense so far? Because why? I want to make sure that this transfers over to our spouse. Full pension. However, if you're also noticing that with every option that you do choose, your retirement income is getting smaller and smaller. So, in other words, it isn't necessarily free to you to have these options for your spouse. Now, I say kids for a reason. In most scenarios, your children will not be included in this factor. If they're over 21 and married and not living with you at home anymore, I'm pretty sure most of us say, if they're living with me, I'm 65, it's going to be a problem, okay? But in this situation, if any of these scenarios happen in your retirement, the children are not included in that pension. Meaning, the buck stops with your spouse.
What if you don't want to leave anything for your spouse?
Then you take the max option. Okay? Now in New York, by the way, I mean I know we're in New York as a kind of a rule of thumb too, they have a law, you cannot pick this option without having your spouse sign off on it.
Wow.
Yes. So in case anybody, I bring that up because we're so close to New York. I had some clients that used to work in New York and then now work in New Jersey, but still have a pension from New York. And so I have to make them aware that legally in New York, if you have a pension, you have to have your spouse authorize you as a retiree to pick this option, to not leave your spouse a dime. Yes, sir.
With your pension, especially in New York, you can withdraw your pension money. It doesn't have to be held by the state.
Correct.
You can do your own investment with it.
Yes.
Or if you prefer, rather than getting their insurance and cutting it down, find your own health insurance, life insurance.
Sure, you have your own options.
Buy your own at a lower premium than what the state's pulling out.
Sure. Yeah, there's plenty of other options for it. And it's good that that comes up because without knowing what your options could be, then you can maybe be in the dark about more cost-effective options like you just said, sir. Absolutely. So New York, bear in mind that this option, but to answer your point, yes, you could. Typically, if a person's single, they will just pick the single option. I call this if you have a spouse, FPL, the frying pan option, because you're going to frying pan straight up your head if you pick this and something happens to you and your spouse gets nothing. All right, so far, this is the mechanics of how a pension generally operates. Now, there could be some slight variations in the calculations here, but for the most part, these income level drops will happen, and they will be reflective of your survivor benefits available to your spouse. All right? Now, the things to consider are the following. I call them the 5 points to consider with regards to some of the options here being picked. Yes, sir.
Smile.
Don't hit me. Actually, we get a picture of Liz with point.
After you're done.
Yeah, okay. 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 So, 5 points to consider. Number 1, when picking your options, there is something that we call, in our industry, called wrong spouse. Wrong. Not doesn't mean when you get married you say to me, I'm not sure that's a good idea. I mean wrong spouse in the sense of typically, and by the way, ladies, this is typically happens in terms of when the woman is a retiree in consideration of their pension. Wrong spouse, and I'll use that. So for example, women, ladies, we typically know that we live longer than men. Is that a fact? Men, sorry, that's just the way it is, and that's how nature works. In the event that a retiree picks this option, and they feel that, okay, so I'll use you as an example, all right? Tamara's retired, she has a spouse, and she says, I want to pick my joint full option, I want to make sure my spouse gets my pension. However, Tamara, you actually outlive your spouse. So in other words, the wrong spouse passes away. Now in this scenario here, in order to take that full option, you gave up about $8,000 in income. And let's say 10 years into your retirement, the wrong spouse passes away. The question is, do we get a refund of our $8,000 that we passed through our pension? No. Could we pop up back to the single option? In some unions you can. Just to let you know. You go to your handbook, you read through that, but some union contracts do have the provision that in the event that this situation happens, you will have an opportunity to pop back up, it's called the pop-up option, to option number 1, the max option, to get more income. However, this, going back to the casino, sorry, it's gone. Right? Follow so far? Now, point number 2 is also known as the 1-2 punch. And this is very common. This actually just happened to a friend of mine who I went to high school with. Not to say that it happens all the time, but I'm sure most of us can probably know somebody who heard of a story where one spouse passes away, and then shortly after, the other spouse passes away. It's called a 1-2 punch. Happened to a friend of mine. Her father recently passed away in March. On Facebook, like most people do, of course, people put up what's going on in their lives and people posting condolences. She said on the post that 7 months to the day was the date of her mother's passing. So mom passed away, and then 7 months later to the day, dad passes away. Now the circumstances could be different, it could be health, it could be anything. But I think it's inarguable to say that the 1-2 punch can happen. And in that situation, depending on how many years have gone by between the first punch and the second punch, we could also have a lost opportunity in terms of dollars. The third thing is to ask the question is, well, what happens in these situations? Can we get a refund? This gentleman mentioned back there, can we get a refund? Do we have any size strategies that we can leverage to be able to make up some of these losses? Like you mentioned, could we maybe even get a raise? In the sense of, could I strategize to be able to get the most out of my pension dollars while still having some of the benefits of protecting my loved one? And the fifth point, with regards to flexibility, and control of your assets, like the gentleman just put, very well said, about taking your pension money out and doing it, working with it yourself, is the concept of your safety deposit box. I'll put just safety box for short here, versus the mailbox. There's a gentleman that works at my office that his spouse is from Iowa. Apparently at some point in the history of Iowa had some rich oil resources. Some of the farmers sold off their land and sold off to the big companies for some huge profits. And so the companies were paying on a dividend basis. So the joke was that he could say it, he said the joke was, you know why the farmer's cash typically sold billed forward? I said, why is that? He said, so you can put his head in the mailbox and get the check. That's why they're hesitant. The reason why is that that farmer was waiting for that check every single month. In the event you pass away, these numbers are great to make sure that your family's taken care of. But what you have to understand is that they will be depending on the mailbox. They will be depending on the letter carrier to show up with that check they need so bad. So when you ask yourself a question, who's really in control? Is it your family or is it that mailbox? The question?
Divorce.
Divorce.
Some states divorce. Once your wife is signed up, she's it. Whether you get a divorce or not, you're stuck.
Yes. Some states that's correct. That's another thing. We'll add that too, just in case anybody wondered about that. Consider divorce. Well, no, don't consider it. I mean, think. You know what I meant. Don't consider it. But understand that a divorce could also be a factor with regards to picking your options. And that is a case-by-case basis because some judges are really harsh, some aren't. Some divorce decrees include the assets of the married home, which includes the pension. So it's something to think about with regards to picking your options. Yes.
In a divorce, both spouses can agree, you keep your pension, I keep mine.
They can. They
And
can.
they can put that in.
They can. Yes. Yes.
But it isn't just what the court decides. When you sign off for your wife to get that money, it doesn't matter. It's not a court decision. You sign off, and legally it says when you sign that pension form, that your wife is it. And if you divorce, it stays there.
I've heard both scenarios with depending on the court, but I've also heard defaulted is the married, depending on the amount of years married. There's other factors to consider. But however, is it a point of consideration? Absolutely. Divorce, and of course that's way out of my area of expertise. No way I'm gonna come up here and tell you I'm a lawyer. But if that's the case, that's where an attorney will come in really good handy in regards to what option will be best served for you with regards to retirement and pension. So wrong spouse, a 1-2 punch. How about a refund? Is that possible? Can we get a raise? The safety box is actually being able to control your own asset of money versus depending on the mailbox. And to the point, divorce. Not considering it, but just understand that it plays a factor with regards to picking a pension option. Any other questions that I believe may have come up before? Because there were really good ones that came in as well. And how am I doing on time? Yes, sir.
How is it determined if the company offers a lump sum or not?
That's stated within their plan document. So if you ever read every company has something called a plan summary, and you'll be able to read your plan summary that's available from your HR person, and the plan summary will tell you what options you have with regards to lump sum distribution, and then from there, you just take it wherever you like.
Is it more common than not? Or,
It's less common because of the fact of pensions being so less offered in the private sector versus the public sector.
is it often in the public sector?
But it's more common in the private sector than it is the public
That's
sector.
what I thought.
New York is an exception because it will allow you, but some states won't. Some states won't, and it all depends also by state. And then somebody mentioned taxes. Some states will tax your pension and some won't. Be mindful of that. Just to give you off top of my head, Delaware, Florida, South Carolina, Texas, Nevada, good places to retire if you have a pension.
So it's.
Or maybe not, for like Las Vegas.
No, I'm saying they don't have.
They put okay.
It's conceivable that you could have, to what Paul said, if you decided to take a lump sum and you do whatever with it, invest whatever you want to do with it, but if you took your pension monthly and you outlived the actuary charts, you could essentially have more money than what.
Yes, essentially you could.
What your share of that pension is.
Essentially you could. And the risk with regards to mortality, was we're talking about mortality, is that when the pension fund underestimates your mortality, which has happened in the private sector specifically, is that the company will actually lower your pension benefit.
Yeah.
So they will actually decrease your income. It's
Is that
happening.
something in the plan documents?
It may not be, because they can change that. It's all dependent on the company. It's not nice at all. It's not.
Yeah, that's like.
It's not. And it's happened. GE, by the way, IBM, were two companies that were known to have recently reduced pension benefits to current retirees today because simply couldn't afford it. Because they thought XYZ person or XYZ employee was going to pass away at 80, and now that employee, like the gentleman right here, is 90. How much more common is that becoming?
Yeah.
And these companies way underestimated that. And so that's the problem. Yes, sir.
On your pension formula at the beginning,
Yes.
some states work at number of years service.
Yes.
Your average.
Yes.
Average 3 times number of years over 55. However, then a state, like Gloria State, comes in and says rather than 55 as a divisor, they're going to move it up to 60. Which lowers your pension.
Right, that's why I said that here, this is subject to change because most people I'm speaking to now are saying more like 30 and out or 35 and out. So the idea of being in the pension system for 25 years is dwindling. The fact is that this number is actually becoming more like 35.
I don't want to take too much time, but I have a weird question related to my industry.
I have a weird answer for you.
I'm in mortgage finance. And we
I wanna see how you're
Yeah,
rating.
in case, we do the police and fire pension
Sure.
mortgage.
Yeah.
And the funds from that obviously come from the pension.
Mhm.
There is a stipulation in the mortgage documents that at any given time, the New Jersey Treasury can decide to consider the proceeds of the mortgage income and tax the borrower in one lump sum on whenever, if they ever decide that they want.
If they ever decide.
Yeah, and they reserve that right, and there's actually disclosure specifically for that. What is going on there?
That, and you know what, you're actually, that's news to me. I had no idea it would work because it's a loan. Loans, by and far, generally speaking, are not taxable as income because it's a loan.
But because it's coming out of the pension fund
Mhm.
for a potential retiree,
Right.
it's weird, and they've never done it, but they can do it, and they're just closing it.
Yeah, I guess maybe now they're disclosing it, whether or not they do it, but the fact they're disclosing it is a very big eye opener to make sure that everybody's aware of what the downfalls could be of leveraging your pension to borrow against. So it seems what's happening as well. So it's something to consider as well. That's yeah. Yes.
Let's say you do the math, right?
You do the max.
Okay?
Right.
Married, you have a family. Can you put in your will that that money automatically transfers into a tax-free account?
Nothing else.
Can you do that?
No, it's nothing
When
done.
you die, that's the end of your.
No, you're right. It has to have a beneficiary attached to the option.
Right?
And it's not even, you can't even charitable trust this. No. Pension funds are exempt for those typical strategies you could do, like say with a 401k, your own IRA or your annuity, whichever it is, those are your funds. Because it's a qualified pension, and it's very restrictive in the sense of what you could do, what your options are after your death, besides your spouse. Dr. Lee, I'm sorry. Coffee, I can take coffee.
Any other questions for Moving?
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
You didn't say, I'm gonna throw you a softball. You didn't say what your role is, where have you come?
Well, at first, actually, let me add also about, Stan, you made a mention a very good point that this is a very well-known Rotary being diverse. And Rotary, I understand, is a very highly regarded organization. I belong to several. To give you also background on myself, I didn't mention this before. I was talking about my bio. I don't know if you hand it off, but I am a member of the American Legion. That gentleman is. I'm a vice commander for Ridgefield Post 221. I also am a member of the Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge number 46 in Rochelle Park. I also belong. Also am a Freemason, by the way. I didn't say this is for the Delhi Lodge number 113. I'm a member there. And I sit on the board of executives for the Rosa Park Business Chamber. And one of my highlights that I personally have with regards to my volunteer service is I'm a Bible study facilitator with the Prison Fellowship Ministry, and I work out of the Bergen County Correctional Facility, where I talk to inmates about Bible studies. So that's what I do. My connection to it is that I help to navigate, explain how this works to anybody who's in the pension system, and then when it comes time to think about things to consider, how to offset all these risks, possibly now, with alternative strategies outside of the pension. And that's where I come in. That's as dry as I'll be. I appreciate that. But I really do, and the reason that I mention all my service is because of the fact that my intention was to be an educator today. Hopefully you got something out of this today. But I really feel that the people that are in this system, they're doing jobs that most of us may not have want to do or may not have done, or regardless, I feel that they have a pension that they deserve, and they need to be fully aware of all the facts. And that's really my driving factor, especially in law enforcement. Yes,
The
sir.
thing that I'm a little confused on is if you work for a major company, whether it be man or woman, and you have a pension. Okay, you mentioned there about if you die, and a certain percentage of that pension can go to a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if it's your first marriage late in life and you marry somebody much younger, now that person may live another 30, 35 years.
Yes.
I mean, how does the company know that much additional monies is gonna have to go out? And does it cost you more to have a spouse included in the pension?
The calculation factor when it comes to the actual age difference is a risk. And it's a risk based on the pension company as well.
So they will adjust?
They could adjust. They couldn't. They reserve, as you mentioned about them reserving the right, they always say they can reserve the right based on the actual age of the spouse. But what they also reserve the right to do is in the event that this becomes, lack of a better term, a losing deal for the private company, they will make their adjustment while your spouse is alive to that income. And I do this because that means the income will drop. They could drop it 20, 30, 40, 50%.
They hire someone and the guy is included in the pension. And then that person opts to have their spouse included when they pass away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and
Exactly.
that's an enormous burden on the company.
Totally. And that's why only about 7%, actually less, more like 5% of private companies in this country even offer a pension. It's way too costly for them to support.